It was one of those rainy afternoons when the streets glistened with a wet shine, reflecting the pale gray sky above. The cafe at the corner of the street smelled of fresh coffee and baked bread. Its warm glow was inviting, a tiny refuge from the drizzle outside. People moved in and out, some hurrying with umbrellas, others lingering with the comfort of a warm drink. Inside, a young man sat alone at a small table by the window, staring at his cup of coffee as though it held all the answers to the questions running through his mind. His eyes were distant, almost lost, as if he had been carrying a heavy weight for a long time. The cafe was filled with quiet chatter, the clinking of spoons against cups and the soft hum of the rain outside. But none of it seemed to reach him. Across the room, a young woman struggled to keep her umbrella from dripping all over the floor as she looked for a place to sit. Every table seemed taken until her eyes met his. He noticed her hesitation and with a small, almost imperceptible nod, gestured to the empty seat across from him. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled softly and made her way over. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, her voice gentle, careful. "Not at all," he replied, his voice low but polite. She sat down, placing her umbrella beside her chair, water dripping from its edge onto the floor. He glanced at her, noticing the tired lines under her eyes, the faint sadness in her expression, and felt a strange sense of connection. He didn't know why, but he felt like he had seen that look somewhere before, perhaps in a reflection of himself. The rain fell harder outside, tapping rhythmically against the window, creating a quiet soundtrack to their silent company. Neither spoke for a moment, and that silence was not uncomfortable. It was as if the world had slowed down just for them, giving them a rare pause in the rush of life. Finally, she broke the silence. "It's really coming down out there." "Yes," he replied, looking out the window. "Seems like it won't let up anytime soon." She smiled faintly, almost to herself. "I like rain, actually. It makes everything feel calmer, like the world is washing away all the noise for a little while." He turned his gaze back to her, surprised at how easily her words had found a place in his thoughts. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted. "I usually just feel stuck inside, waiting for it to end." For a while they sat quietly, each lost in their own thoughts, yet feeling the presence of the other. There was a gentle understanding in the air, an unspoken recognition that both of them were carrying invisible burdens. After a few minutes, she glanced at him, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Do you come here often?" "Not really," he said with a small smile. "I usually just wander around when I need to think. This place, it's quiet. I like that." "I know what you mean," she replied. "It's one of the few places where I feel like I can breathe for a bit. Away from everything that's pressing in on me." Something in her tone made him nod slowly. He understood that feeling all too well. Life had a way of piling up, of pushing people into corners, and yet sometimes strangers could offer a moment of relief, a tiny window to catch a breath. The conversation drifted naturally from there, from the weather to the small details of their days, to the little things that mattered more than they might seem. They spoke about favorite books, childhood memories, and the quiet joys that often went unnoticed. Each word, each glance, built a fragile bridge between them, a connection that neither expected but both needed. He noticed the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about something she loved, the way her hands moved as if shaping invisible ideas in the air. She noticed the subtle gestures he made, the way he listened so intently as if every word she said mattered. There was no rush, no pressure, just the slow unfolding of two lives intersecting. Even if only for a moment, hours seemed to pass unnoticed. The rain outside had slowed, leaving behind puddles that reflected the fading light. The cafe had emptied slightly, but neither of them seemed ready to leave. There was a quiet comfort in simply being together. Even without grand gestures or declarations at one point, he caught himself staring, not in a way that was intrusive, but in the way you look at something rare, fragile, and beautiful. She caught his gaze and smiled softly, a little shyly, and the air between them seemed to hum with something unspoken. "You have a way of making things seem less heavy." Almost as if she was surprised by her own words, he looked down at his cup, unsure of how to respond. "Maybe that's because I understand what it's like to carry too much," he said finally. She nodded slowly, the sadness in her eyes softened by the faint glimmer of hope. "I think everyone needs someone who understands, even if just a little." For a moment, the world outside disappeared entirely. There was no rain, no chatter, no clinking of cups, only the quiet presence of two people who by chance had found a place where they could be themselves. As the afternoon turned into evening, the cafe began to empty. The lights dimmed slightly, casting long shadows across the floor. They both realized, almost simultaneously, that the time had passed far too quickly. "I should probably go," she said softly, gathering her things. "Yeah," he replied, a twinge of reluctance in his voice. I'm glad you came over." "Me too," she said, smiling gently. "I didn't expect to feel this way, but I'm glad I did." He nodded, unsure of what else to say. Words seemed inadequate for the weight of what he was feeling, a mixture of relief, curiosity, something that felt dangerously like hope. As they stepped outside, the rain had stopped completely. The streets were slick, the air fresh with the smell of wet earth. She opened her umbrella and held it over herself, though he noticed that he wished she hadn't, that he could walk beside her without a barrier between them. "Maybe we'll see each other again," she said, a gentle hope in her voice. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that he hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd like that." They parted ways at the corner of the street, each walking in opposite directions, carrying with them a memory that neither would forget. It was a brief encounter, almost ordinary, yet it had left an imprint on their hearts, a quiet reminder that connection could happen when you least expected it. Over the next few days, both found themselves thinking about that afternoon more than they cared to admit. He would catch himself replaying her smile, the sound of her voice, the way she had spoken about the small joys in life. She would remember his quiet patience, the way he had listened without judgment, and the strange warmth that came from feeling understood. Neither of them knew where this path might lead, or if they would ever cross again. But for the first time in a long while, both felt a sense of possibility, a fragile hope that maybe life could surprise them in the best way. It was in these small, quiet moments that the seeds of something deeper were planted. A connection that was more than chance, more than coincidence, and yet delicate enough to be easily broken. And neither of them knew, as they went about their separate days, that this encounter would change the course of their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The days that followed their first meeting felt different, though neither of them could fully understand why. It was as if the world had subtly shifted, leaving behind a faint trace of that quiet connection in the cafe. He found himself glancing at the little coffee shop more often than he intended, wondering if he might see her again. She, meanwhile, felt a strange anticipation each time she walked past the corner where they had parted. It was a small, unremarkable street, yet it had come to hold a weight of memory and possibility. At first, the meetings were accidental. He would step out of his office for a quick lunch and find her standing at the crosswalk, her umbrella tucked under her arm, the same gentle smile on her face as if nothing had changed. Or she would walk into the small bookstore where he sometimes wandered, pretending to browse titles while secretly hoping for a glimpse of him. Each encounter began with a shy greeting, a polite acknowledgement, and a cautious conversation that never rushed into familiarity. "Hey," he said one afternoon, his voice slightly louder than he intended, as she entered the small shop. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect to see you either," she replied, her eyes lighting up. "I come here sometimes, but it's not often." They moved to a small corner of the store where the stacks of books created a kind of private world. She pulled out a novel she had been curious about, flipping through the pages with a concentration that made him smile. "Do you read much?" she asked, glancing at him. "I try," he said. "It depends on the day, I guess. Some days, it's easier to get lost in a story than in my own thoughts." She nodded, as if understanding something he had not said out loud. "I know what you mean. Some days, the world feels too heavy, and books are the only place you can breathe without explaining yourself." That simple acknowledgement created a new kind of intimacy between them, one that didn't need grand gestures or promises. They began to meet more intentionally, arranging small coffee breaks or short walks through quiet streets. Each meeting was slow and deliberate, as if they were learning the rhythm of each other's presence. Testing the boundaries without fear, one afternoon they found themselves walking through a small park. The trees were still tinged with the last hints of autumn, leaves falling softly to the ground, painting the path in shades of gold and brown. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. She laughed at something he said, a soft, warm sound that seemed to linger in the space between them. Your laugh. It's contagious, he said, smiling genuinely. She looked down for a moment, a little shy, before glancing back at him. I didn't know laughter could do that, she said softly. I feel lighter when I'm around you. Almost like the weight I carry gets a little smaller. He stopped walking for a moment, looking at her seriously. I feel the same, he admitted. It's strange, isn't it? How do people can meet and suddenly make the heaviness a little easier to bear? They continued walking, the conversation flowing easily. She spoke about the small, meaningful moments in her life, her love for old movies, the way she liked to write little notes in a journal no one would ever read, the joy she found in cooking for herself on quiet evenings. He shared pieces of his world too, the small victories and disappointments that shaped his days, the lingering ache from past losses that sometimes made him feel untethered. Over time, the walls they had both built around themselves began to soften. She began to trust him with thoughts she had never voiced to anyone else, and he found himself sharing things he had long buried under layers of caution. There was a sense of safety in their growing bond, a rare feeling of being seen without judgment. One rainy evening, they found themselves back at the cafe where it all began. The familiar smell of coffee and pastries, the soft hum of conversation, and the gentle patter of rain against the window created a cocoon of familiarity. They sat in the same corner where they had first met, and for a while, neither spoke. It was as if words were unnecessary. The quiet presence of each other was enough. Finally, she broke the silence. I've been thinking a lot about that day, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know it would matter so much meeting you. But it did. More than I expected. He looked at her, a mixture of relief and emotion in his eyes. I've been thinking about it too, he admitted. I didn't realize how much a single moment could change the way you see everything else. They smiled at each other, a small, understanding smile that carried the weight of their unspoken feelings. In that moment, there was no past pain, no fear of what might come, only the fragile, tentative hope that something real was beginning to grow between them. Their bond deepened in small, everyday ways. They discovered favorite cafes, quiet streets, and hidden corners of the city that felt like their own secret world. They shared meals, exchanged books, and spent hours talking about the things that mattered most and least. Each moment, though ordinary, felt extraordinary because it was shared with someone who seemed to understand the rhythm of their heart. But even in these moments of warmth, there were shadows. Both carried scars from the past, moments of loss and disappointment that had shaped who they were. He sometimes hesitated, unsure if he was ready to open himself completely. She, too, struggled with the fear of being hurt again, of giving too much to someone who might not stay. Yet, despite these fears, they continued to draw closer, finding strength in each other's presence. One evening, as they walked along a quiet street lined with old buildings, she stopped and looked at him seriously. I want to be honest with you, she said. I like being around you more than I expected, more than I'm comfortable admitting. And I'm scared of what that means. He stopped as well, his heart pounding. I feel the same, he admitted. I've tried to keep my distance, but I can't. Being with you, it feels like the only place I can breathe. They stood there for a long moment, the air between them thick with unspoken emotion. Then, almost instinctively, they reached for each other's hands. A simple touch that carried more meaning than words could convey. It was a connection that spoke of trust, vulnerability, and a tentative hope that love could grow, even in the shadow of past pain. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship became a quiet rhythm, a dance of understanding, patience, and small joys. They laughed together, comforted each other, and shared the simple pleasures that often went unnoticed in the rush of life. Each moment strengthened the bond between them, creating a sense of belonging that neither had experienced in a long time. Yet, beneath the surface, both were aware of the fragility of what they were building. Life had a way of testing even the strongest connections, and they knew that their growing closeness could be disrupted by misunderstandings, fears, or the unexpected challenges of everyday life. Still, they chose to continue, drawn together by a force that neither could fully explain. One night, as they sat by the window of his small apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, she spoke softly. "Do you ever think about the future?" He looked at her, considering the question. "I try not to," he said. "The future can be uncertain, but I do think about now, about moments like this. And I want to make the most of them with you." She smiled, a mixture of relief and hope in her expression. "I feel the same. It's scary, but it feels right." Their connection continued to grow, built on shared experiences, quiet understanding, and a willingness to be vulnerable with each other. They discovered the beauty in small moments: a shared meal, a walk in the park, a quiet conversation over coffee, and found that these moments, though simple, held a depth of emotion that was hard to describe. In the weeks that followed, they became a part of each other's lives in ways that felt natural and inevitable. Friends noticed the subtle changes: the way they looked at each other, the way their moods lifted when they were together. Family members, too, sensed the growing bond. Even if they did not understand its full depth, through it all they faced challenges, both internal and external. Misunderstandings arose, fears crept in, and past experiences threatened to intrude. But each time they chose to communicate, to listen, and to support one another. It was not always easy, and there were moments of doubt and uncertainty. Yet these challenges only strengthened the connection, teaching them the value of patience, empathy, and unwavering presence. By the end of this part of their journey, they had become more than acquaintances, more than friends. They had found in each other a kind of solace, a safe space where they could be themselves without fear. And though they did not yet fully understand what the future held, they knew that they had discovered something rare and precious: an emotional bond that promised to grow, evolve, and endure. The early weeks of their growing closeness had been gentle, filled with laughter, quiet moments, and small gestures that spoke volumes. But life, as it often does, began to press in with its usual weight, testing the fragile bond they had built. It started with small things: missed calls, delayed messages, and fleeting moments of doubt. He had been asked to take on additional responsibilities at work, long hours that left him exhausted and distracted. She, meanwhile, was pulled in different directions, balancing family concerns and personal responsibilities that had quietly grown heavier over time. One afternoon, he had planned to meet her for a walk along the riverside, a place where they often found solace. He imagined the soft breeze, the reflection of the sun on the water, and her laughter echoing across the quiet path. But the day had been chaotic, meetings had spilled into each other. And by the time he finally looked at his phone, she had already texted that she was leaving the city's center. He felt a pang of guilt mixed with frustration. He typed a quick apology, his fingers hovering over the screen before he sent it, then put the phone down. She, on her part, read the message while sitting on a park bench, the late afternoon sun falling across her notebook. She had been excited for their walk, looking forward to the simple comfort of their company. But instead she felt a flicker of disappointment. When they finally met later that evening, the tension was palpable, though neither wanted to acknowledge it immediately. She approached with a polite smile, but he could see the edge of sadness in her eyes. He offered a small greeting, but it sounded hollow even to him. "Sorry I couldn't meet earlier," said quietly. She nodded, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It's okay. I thought we had planned this. I guess I misjudged." The words hung between them, more pointed than either intended. It was the first time they felt the weight of expectation clash with reality, and it was uncomfortable, strange, and heavy in a way neither had anticipated. Over the next few days, the distance grew, subtle, but undeniable. Messages became less frequent, calls shorter, and the warmth of their conversations felt muted. They were both busy, yes, but there was something Mara, creeping fear that the bond they had nurtured could be disrupted by small misunderstandings or unspoken frustrations. One evening, she decided to confront the unease directly. They met at the little cafe where it all began, hoping that familiarity would ease the tension. She arrived first, sliding into the corner booth with a sigh. He appeared a few minutes later, Pete, looking tired but relieved to see her. They sat across from each other, both hesitant, both aware of the fragile space that now existed between them. Finally, she spoke. I feel like we're not really connecting lately. It's like something's changed, but I don't know why. He looked down at his hands, the nervous energy making him fidget. I know what you mean. I felt it too. It's just, life has been messy lately, and I don't want it to affect us, but maybe it already has. Her eyes softened, a mixture of understanding and sadness. I know we both have things we're dealing with, but I hate feeling like we're drifting apart over nothing. It hurts more than I expected. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, unsure if the gesture would be welcomed or misinterpreted. I don't want to drift apart, he said earnestly. I like being with you more than I've liked being with anyone in a long time. Sometimes I don't know how to show it when everything else is pulling me in a different direction. She exhaled slowly, the tension easing slightly. I feel the same. I think we're both scared of letting ourselves fully feel it because we know it matters, and that scares us. But I don't want to let fear ruin what we have. It was a turning point, though not a simple one. They spent hours talking, unraveling the small frustrations, clarifying the miscommunications, and reaffirming their feelings. But even after the conversation, a lingering unease remained. A subtle reminder that love was not only about moments of joy, it was also about facing the shadows that inevitably crept in the following days. Life's pressures continued to test them. He was assigned a project that demanded late nights and unexpected travel. She received news of an urgent family matter, one that required her attention and time. Both wanted to reach out to each other to maintain their connection, but exhaustion and responsibilities often got in the way. One rainy evening, she walked alone along the city streets, the soft patter of rain matching the turmoil inside her. She missed the comfort of his presence, the quiet reassurance that everything would be okay. She thought of the first day they had met, the small talk over coffee, the ease of simply being together. Those memories were now tinged with a bittersweet ache. Meanwhile, he sat in his apartment, staring at his phone, wondering if she was thinking of him, if she felt the same quiet longing he did. He wanted to call, to hear her voice, but he feared that reaching out might feel like pressure, or worse, intrusion. Instead, he sent a brief message, thinking of you. It was simple, tentative, and honest. When she received it, a small smile crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by the weight of reality. Life had complicated their connection, and neither of them had yet learned how to navigate the delicate balance between presence and absence. The days blurred together. They saw each other less frequently, and when they did, the joy of companionship was mixed with the shadow of stress and unspoken fears. Yet, despite the distance, both felt the undercurrent of care, the subtle pull that drew them back to each other even when circumstances kept them apart. One weekend, they finally found a moment to meet without distractions. They walked through a quiet park, leaves rustling under their feet, the air cool and crisp. The silence between them was not awkward this time. It was contemplative, a space where unspoken emotions could breathe. I've been thinking a lot about us, he said finally, his voice low. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. I have too. I don't want to lose what we're building. But it's hard sometimes, isn't it? Life keeps testing us. He nodded. It is hard, but maybe that's part of it. Maybe love isn't just about the easy moments. It's about holding on even when everything feels like it's pulling you apart. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally, grounding both of them in the present. I want to try, she said softly. I want to keep trying, even when it's hard. Because what we have, it matters. That afternoon became a quiet turning point. They realized that love was not just about joy and comfort. It was also about patience, understanding, and resilience. They promised themselves that they would communicate, that they would not let fear or misunderstanding dictate the course of their relationship. Yet, even with this renewed determination, challenges remained. Misunderstandings still flared from time to time, small insecurities crept in, and the demands of life threatened to pull them in different directions. But each time, they returned to the same principle: honesty, patience, and the willingness to face the uncomfortable truths together. Through these trials, they discovered a deeper layer of connection. It was not the easy, carefree companionship of early weeks, but a more profound, grounded bond that could withstand pressure. They learned to listen not just to words, but to the emotions behind them. They learned to be present, even when life's chaos demanded attention elsewhere. They discovered that love was not a perfect feeling, but a choice, renewed each day through effort, understanding, and vulnerability. And still, there were moments of tenderness. Quiet dinners, shared walks, and the simple comfort of holding hands became anchors amid the storm of life. Every laugh, every touch, every glance reinforced their connection, reminding them of why they chose to remain close despite the difficulties. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the river, the lights of the city reflecting off the water, he turned to her. "Do you ever feel scared?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her eyes reflecting both fear and determination. "All the time. But I also feel hope, and I think that hope is stronger than the fear," smiled softly, squeezing her hand. "Then we hold on to that hope, together." In that moment, the city around them faded, leaving only the quiet presence of two people who had learned that love was not always simple, not always easy, but always worth the effort. They understood that challenges would come, that misunderstandings and distance would test them, but they also knew that their bond was real, resilient, and capable of withstanding the trials ahead. By the end of this period, they had faced their first real fracture, not with anger or blame, but with honest conversation and emotional courage. They had discovered that love was not merely the joy of shared laughter, but also the bravery to confront difficulties, the willingness to remain vulnerable, the commitment to nurture something fragile and precious, though the future remained uncertain. Both felt a quiet reassurance that they were not alone. They had found a kind of partnership that went beyond surface connection, a bond built on patience, empathy, and unwavering presence. And as they walked home that night, hands intertwined, hearts quietly beating in tandem, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The weeks that followed their renewed commitment to one another carried a strange mixture of hope and uncertainty. Life never paused to accommodate love. Both of them were becoming increasingly aware that the bond they had nurtured was fragile. They had faced small misunderstandings, but now the weight of reality began to press harder, testing their patience and resilience. He had been offered an opportunity he had long dreamed of, a project that required him to travel to another city for several months. It was an exciting step for his career, something he had wanted for years, yet the thought of being away from her made his chest tighten with unease. He tried to focus on the positives, convincing himself that the distance would only strengthen their connection. But deep down, he feared it could also be the start of a fracture too large to repair. She noticed the tension immediately when he told her. They were sitting in a small cafe, the same one where they had first met months ago. The familiarity of the place should have been comforting, yet neither of them could ignore the underlying anxiety that came with this new development. "That's amazing news," she said, her voice careful, as though she were measuring her words. "You've worked so hard for this. I'm proud of you." He forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you. I've wanted this for so long, but..." He paused, looking down at his hands. "I don't want to be away from you. I don't want this to change anything between us." She reached across the table, touching his hand gently. "I know, I feel the same. And I also know this is a big opportunity for you. I want you to take it. But it scares me, the thought of being apart." They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in thought. The cafe hummed quietly around them, the soft chatter of strangers feeling strangely distant. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, as if echoing the unease that had settled in their hearts. "I've been thinking about what we'll do," he said finally. "About how to make this work. I don't want to lose what we have, not after everything, but I don't know if I can manage it from afar." She squeezed his hand gently. "Neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out, step by step. Talk more, visit when we can, trust each other." It was a fragile promise, held together by hope and determination. They both understood that love was more than words. It was the choices they made, the effort they invested, and the courage to face uncertainty together. Yet even as they tried to reassure each other, a quiet fear lingered beneath the surface. The unspoken question of whether distance would reveal cracks too deep to mend. The days leading up to his departure were filled with a mixture of joy and tension. They spent hours together, savoring every moment as if it were both ordinary and extraordinary. Walks through familiar streets, quiet dinners, and long conversations became imbued with a bittersweet urgency. They laughed, held hands, and shared small, tender moments, but always under the shadow of the impending separation. On the day he was to leave, the city seemed unusually gray, the sky heavy with clouds that mirrored their mood. She accompanied him to the train station, the platform bustling with travelers. The air filled with the rhythmic clatter of trains and the low hum of announcements. They stood close together, neither wanting to let go. "Promise me something," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Anything," replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Promise me that we'll try. That distance won't change what we have." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I promise. No matter what, I won't give up on us." She forced a smile, hiding the tears threatening to fall. "I won't either." When the train arrived, they embraced tightly, holding on to each other as if the strength of their connection could somehow bridge the miles that would soon separate them. And when the train doors closed, leaving her standing on the platform, she felt a hollow ache in her chest. She watched until the train disappeared from view, the crowd around her moving as if unaware of the storm inside her. The first weeks apart were hard. The distance magnified their fears and insecurities. Calls and messages became lifelines, yet even technology could not replace the warmth of presence. They spoke late into the night, sometimes laughing, sometimes sharing quiet confessions of longing, and sometimes frustration slipped through. Small misunderstandings intensified by exhaustion and the inability to be physically present. She found herself wandering the streets they had walked together, touching her phone as if expecting him to be there, wishing for the simple comfort of his voice. He, meanwhile, sat alone in his temporary apartment, staring out at a city that felt unfamiliar and isolating, thinking of her smile and the way her presence had become an essential part of his daily life. One evening, she received a message that made her heart race. "Can we video call?" "I need to see you," he had written. Her reply was immediate. "Yes, I need to see you too." When they connected, the screen between them seemed both too close and too far. They talked, laughed, and shared the small details of their days. But there was an undercurrent of longing that neither could fully satisfy. They missed the comfort of touch, the reassurance of presence, the unspoken connection that existed in the same room. Despite the challenges, these trials revealed a new depth to their bond. They learned to communicate with care, to express fears and frustrations without blame, and to nurture the connection that mattered more than distance or inconvenience. Each call, each message, became a testament to their determination to hold on, a promise that they were willing to fight for what they had. Yet life's challenges did not end with distance. She faced her own unexpected turn when a family matter demanded her attention far more than she had anticipated. A relative's illness required her to travel unexpectedly, leaving her exhausted and emotionally drained. She wanted to tell him to share the weight of her worry, but feared that it might seem like an additional burden. When she finally did speak to him about it, late one night over a call, she found herself breaking down in a way she hadn't expected. "I don't know how to handle this," she admitted, her voice quivering. I feel like everything is happening at once, and I don't want to fall apart in front of you, but I can't stop crying." He listened quietly, his heart aching for her. "You don't have to be strong for me," he said softly. "I'm here. You can let it out. You're not alone." Her tears flowed freely, and he offered nothing but understanding, patience, and a comforting presence through the screen. In that moment, the distance felt both cruel and necessary. They could not hold each other physically. Yet their emotional bond proved resilient, capable of sustaining them even in the absence of touch. Through these trials, they both began to realize the true nature of their feelings. It was no longer just companionship or comfort, it was a deep, abiding connection that demanded courage, sacrifice, and trust. They had to confront the fragility of life, the unpredictability of circumstance, and the uncertainty of the future. And yet, despite all of it, they chose to hold on, to nurture what had become essential to their sense of hope and belonging. One quiet evening, after weeks of distance and worry, they decided to meet again in person. The anticipation was almost unbearable, each of them counting the days, imagining what it would be like to finally bridge the gap that had separated them. When they saw each other again, the world seemed to pause, the city streets faded, the noise of life disappeared, and all that remained was the quiet certainty of their connection. They embraced, not with hesitation but with relief, as if the months of worry and longing had been condensed into that single moment. Words were unnecessary. Their hearts spoke in the silent language of touch and presence. The weeks apart had been difficult, but they had proven the strength of their bond, revealing a resilience neither had fully understood until now. The days that followed were filled with tenderness and quiet joy. They walked together through familiar streets, sharing meals, and laughing in ways that had been impossible over screens and distance. Every moment was infused with a heightened awareness of the preciousness of time, the value of presence, and the fragility of human connection. Yet even in these moments of reunion, they both knew that life would continue to test them. Challenges, uncertainties, and unexpected obstacles were inevitable. But they also knew that they had discovered something rare, a love that demanded effort, patience, and courage, and that was worth fighting for, no matter the hardships. As they sat together one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she rested her head on his shoulder. "I was so scared we wouldn't make it through the distance," she whispered. He held her tightly, his voice soft but steady. "I was scared too. But we did. We're still here, and that's what matters. We faced it together." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally, and she smiled. I think we're stronger than we realize." He smiled back, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Yes, and we'll keep getting stronger no matter what comes next." In that quiet moment, they understood that love was not merely the joy of being together. It was the bravery to face separation, the patience to endure uncertainty, and the commitment to nurture something fragile and precious. They had learned that true connection required more than words. It required presence, understanding, and the courage to stay even when the path was difficult. And though the future remained uncertain, both felt a deep, quiet reassurance. They had weathered distance, worry, and fear. They had faced challenges that tested their hearts and emerged with a bond stronger than before. Whatever trials lay ahead, they knew they would face them together with patience, trust, and the unwavering belief that their love was worth every effort, every tear, and every sacrifice. The days after their reunion were full of quiet joy, but both of them knew the world could never slow down to match the pace of their hearts. Life had a way of intruding, even into moments of happiness, of reminding them that love, as beautiful as it was, required constant care and courage. They moved together through the city streets, walked through familiar parks, and shared long conversations. Each encounter building layers of trust and intimacy, yet, beneath the calm surface, the future loomed with uncertainty. He was still faced with demanding work responsibilities. She had her own obligations and responsibilities that called her attention away. The distance between moments of togetherness felt more pronounced. Now, because they both understood how fleeting these moments could be, and the awareness of this fragility only deepened their appreciation for every shared smile, every touch, every word. One evening, as they walked through the city, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement, she suddenly stopped and looked at him with a seriousness that startled him. "Do you ever wonder if we'll be okay?" she asked quietly. He took a deep breath, looking into her eyes, seeing the vulnerability he had come to know so well. "All the time," he admitted. "But I also know that we've faced so much already and we've managed to stay connected. That gives me hope." She nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I do too. But hope feels fragile sometimes. I think about everything that could go wrong, and it scares me." He reached out, taking her hand gently in his. Love isn't about not being scared. It's about facing that fear together, holding on even when everything feels uncertain. They continued walking, the night quiet around them except for the distant hum of the city. There was a deep sense of understanding in their silence, a recognition that love was as much about the quiet, shared endurance as it was about laughter and joy. In the weeks that followed, they began to plan for a more stable future together, discussing ways to navigate the practicalities of life while keeping their connection strong. They talked about moving closer to each other, about creating routines that allowed them to spend time together despite the demands of work and family. These conversations were tinged with excitement, but also a quiet tension, the weight of responsibility, pressed down on their hopes, reminding them that love required effort as much as desire. One afternoon, while sitting in the park where they had spent many hours together, she turned to him with a contemplative look. "I think about what it would mean to truly commit to this," she said softly. "To plan a life together, knowing that it won't always be easy." He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "I've thought about it too, and I know it won't be easy. Life is unpredictable. But I also know that being with you makes everything feel more manageable, stronger, worth it." Her hand found his, and they sat together in silence, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees filling the space between them. It was a quiet affirmation, shared understanding that love required not only feeling, but also action, the conscious choice to remain present, patient, and committed. As the months passed, their relationship deepened in ways neither had fully anticipated. They celebrated small victories together, offered comfort during moments of disappointment, and learned the rhythm of each other's needs and moods. Every conversation, every gesture, every shared experience strengthened the foundation of their connection. Yet even in this stability, challenges persisted. Work demands, family obligations, and the unpredictability of life occasionally intruded, testing their patience and resilience. Arguments arose, misunderstandings flared, and moments of doubt threatened to unsettle the calm they had built. But each time, they returned to the same principle: communication, empathy, and unwavering commitment. One evening, after a particularly stressful week for both of them, they sat together in his small apartment, the city lights twinkling through the window. She leaned her head on his shoulder, exhaustion etched into her features. "I feel like everything is piling up," she admitted. "I don't know how to balance it all." He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "I know. I feel the same sometimes. But we don't have to carry it alone. We have each other. We'll figure it out together." Her fingers traced patterns on his hand, a silent reassurance. "I don't know what I would do without you," she whispered. "You'll never have to find out," he replied softly. "I'm not going anywhere." These moments, though quiet and simple, became the heartbeat of their relationship. They realized that love was not always about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in the shared silence, the comforting touch, the unspoken understanding that they were there for each other. No matter what, as time went on, they began to talk about the future with a sense of hope that had once felt fragile. They discussed moving in together, creating routines that allowed them to balance work, personal growth, and their connection. Every plan was made with care, consideration, and a recognition that life would always present obstacles, but that together, they could face them. One afternoon, while walking through the same streets where they had first met, she paused and looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. He smiled, remembering the early days, the accidental meetings, the quiet moments of understanding, the tentative first gestures of trust. All the time, he admitted. I think about how scared we were and how uncertain everything felt. And now, look at us, she smiled back, a mixture of nostalgia and hope in her eyes. It feels almost unreal. Like we've been through so much, and yet here we are still standing, still choosing each other every day. He took her hand, squeezing it gently, and we'll keep choosing each other, no matter what comes next. The following weeks brought moments of quiet celebration. They found joy in small things, a shared meal, a spontaneous walk, a lazy afternoon reading together. Each day, they discovered new facets of one another, deepening the connection that had started with a simple conversation in a cafe months ago. But life, as always, remained unpredictable. One evening, she received news that her family needed her urgently again. The responsibility weighed heavily on her, but she knew that avoiding it was not an option. She called him immediately, explaining the situation. Her voice tinged with worry and fatigue. I have to go, she said softly. It's important, and I can't put it off. I don't want this to affect us. He listened quietly, his heart aching at the thought of her stress. Go, he said finally. Take care of what you need to. I'll be here when you get back. Nothing will change between us. They shared a long, quiet conversation, reassuring one another, before ending the call with a promise to remain connected despite the temporary separation. Even in the face of uncertainty, they had learned to trust in their bond, understanding that love required both patience and faith. When she returned, the relief and joy were palpable. They embraced the tension of separation, dissolving into quiet comfort. The weeks apart had been challenging, but they had proven once again that their connection was resilient, capable of withstanding the trials of life. As the year drew to a close, they found themselves reflecting on their journey. From a chance encounter in a small cafe to the trials of distance and life's unpredictability, they had grown together, discovering the depth of their feelings and the strength of their bond. Every challenge had taught them patience, empathy, and the courage to remain present for one another. One evening, as they walked along the river, the city lights reflecting on the water like scattered stars, he stopped and turned to her. I've been thinking, he said softly, about how much you mean to me and how I can't imagine my life without you. Her eyes filled with emotion, a mixture of love, relief, and anticipation. I feel the same, she whispered. Every day I realize how much you've become a part of me. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding with the weight of the moment. Then let's make a promise, he said. No matter what comes, no matter how hard life gets, we face it together. We choose each other every day, she nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I promise, she said softly. I'll choose you, always. They stood there, hands intertwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony, aware of both the fragility and the strength of what they had built. Love, they realized, was not always easy. It was a journey filled with uncertainty, challenges, and moments of doubt. But it was also filled with joy, comfort, and the profound understanding that comes from truly seeing and being seen by another person. As the night settled around them, they walked home together, side by side, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it united. The trials they had endured had strengthened their bond, and the journey ahead, though uncertain, was a path they were ready to navigate together. In the quiet of that night, with the city softly glowing around them, they understood the true meaning of love. It was not just the excitement of new beginnings, nor the comfort of familiar routines. It was the courage to remain vulnerable, the patience to endure challenges, and the choice to stand by one another no matter what. And in that choice, they found a joy deeper than any fleeting happiness, a joy rooted in connection, trust, and the knowledge that they had found something rare, precious, and enduring. The story of their love, once uncertain and fragile, had become a testament to the human heart's capacity to endure, to hope, and to choose connection above fear. They had learned that tears, laughter, distance, And trials were all part of the journey, but none could diminish the bond they had nurtured. As they entered their apartment, still holding hands, they paused at the doorway. Turning to each other, "We made it," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, smiling through her tears, "and we'll keep making it together." And with that, they stepped inside, leaving behind the world's noise and uncertainty, embracing the quiet certainty of love that had been tested, proven, and chosen. It was a love that would endure, not because it was easy, but because they had chosen each other every day, through every challenge, every doubt, and every fleeting moment. In the end, it was not just a story of meeting, longing, or reunion. It was a story of courage, patience, and the quiet. It's a profound beauty of two hearts committed to walking life's uncertain path together. And that, more than anything else, was a love worth every tear, every moment of fear, and every heartbeat they had shared.